Hello, everybody. This is Wayne Bowen. I am the Senior Recycling Program Manager for the Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center. Welcome and thank you for joining us for this informational webinar on the overview of the Pennsylvania DEP General Permit WMGM 017, also known as GP17. With us, we have some folks from the DEP Central Office. We have Jason Dunham, who leads the environmental group in the Waste Management Division. And also we have Chris Terstein, who's also an engineer in the environmental group. He also reviews the permit applications that come across the DEP's desk. So this webinar was put together by the Recycling Market Center. So the content is solely the responsibility of the Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center. So this is the presentation outline. We're going to first go over the hierarchy of the PA DEP permits for food waste and food scraps composting. A little bit of history of the General Permit 17, and then we'll talk about the recent permit modifications and the key provisions of this new 17 permit. And then we're going to turn it over to DEP to talk about the application forms and fees, the submission process, and then later on I'll be coming back to talk about some of the compost sites operating under the new modifications, and then of course the Q&A. So regarding the food scraps permitting hierarchy in Pennsylvania, the least amount of requirements from a regulatory standpoint are for sites that are exempt. And here's some examples: mulch only operations, agricultural use of food processing waste. Animal feed is exempt, but it is regulated by the Food and Drug Administration and the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. And there is one exception. General permit is required for unpackaged bakery produce and dairy products that are diverted from disposal for beneficial use as a replacement for dry feed or livestock. That's basically for folks who transport food waste to an animal feed operation. All agricultural operations must follow nutrient management plans and must follow department-specific best management practices. And some of these activities do require notification to the department before implementing. The next level is the permit by rule. Under current DEP regulations, the municipal and commercial leaf and yard waste composting operations under 5 acres can operate under the permit by rule. Captive facilities are exempt under permit by rule. Examples are facilities that compost their own waste that's generated on their site, such as a university or school campus. So medical campuses, example, even though they're not on the same physical properties, they can be considered permit by rule captive. And again, these activities should be registered with the department. And then the next level is the general permit, which is where most facilities fall under that benefit or that compost food waste. There's several general permits out there, which I'll talk about later. And then, of course, the individual permit is for larger compost sites, and typically sites that process biosolids require individual permits. So here's a summary of the main general permits that are used for food scraps composting and anaerobic digestion. And obviously, we're going to be talking about the 17 permit, which is basically, it started off as an on-farm composting permit. Currently, there's 16 permits enforced statewide, and the permit was recently renewed with an expiration date of September 2032, which is a 10-year term for the permit. And the typical feedstocks for a 17 permit are manure, yard waste, source separated food scraps, and newspaper and cardboard. The maximum size for a permit area for a GP17 is 5 acres, and that's for the on-farm operation, and less than 2 acres, 2 acres or less for the small scale or non-farm operation. What you see here in yellow is basically the new provisions of the permit. And then the 17 now allows for vermicomposting, which is using worms to process food waste into a vermicompost. It's a compost-like material that's also used as soil amendments, and also Hermetiacomposting, which is a new term invented, which means Hermetia is the scientific name of the Hermetia elutions, or black soldier fly. The larvae actually do the Hermetia composting, much like a worm does. And then there's the General Permit 25. Currently, there are 9 of these permits enforced statewide. That permit was just renewed in 2018, I believe, and the 10-year permit expiration date is February 10th of 2028. These sites are allowed up to 15 acres. If they're over 5 acres or their total volume is greater than 6,000 cubic yards per acre, a closure bond is required for that type of site. And there's a larger list of feedstocks that are allowed under a General Permit 25. Agricultural waste, butcher waste, other than whole carcasses, pre and post food waste, land clearing, untreated wood, untreated, unpainted engineered wood, gypsum wallboard, papers, cardboard, wax cardboard, paper mill sludges, spent mushroom substrate. There's a lot of requirements under this permit, but it does require specific feedstock management, sampling, quarterly sampling of the material, leachate management, and an engineered composting pad. General Permit 42 is the permit for anaerobic co-digestion. Typically, they're located on farms, but there's more interest in developing these sites off farms. Right now, there are 17 permits enforced statewide. And that, again, that 10-year permit was just renewed in 2018 with a new expiration date of August of 2032. And they're also allowed to accept grease trap waste in addition to food scraps. And again, they're co-digested with manure farm facilities. The methane gas produced is used as a fuel to produce electricity, and the waste solids, or the digestate, can be dewatered and dried and used as animal bedding on site. And then liquid waste of the digestate can be added to the soil or the farmland for agricultural purposes. And then a key provision of this permit is they added an amendment which allows for depackaging food. That was done in 2021. And then the General Permit 45 is the food waste composting on quarry sites. Right now, there are 5 permits enforced statewide, and the 10-year permit exemption expiration date is November of 2032. And then possibly coming in the future, a modification of the biobin permit to allow for small scale anaerobic digestion units. Again, there's a lot of interest in anaerobic digestion on a small scale, even a residential scale, but typically a small business or a restaurant could take advantage of this permit. This is a graphic summary of the food waste composting and AD permits out there, and they're shown by region. And as you can see, the Northwest has a total of 6 permits, 417 permits, and 125, and then 142. The Southwest also has 6, 417, 125, and 142, just like the Northwest. The North Central region has a total of 8, 117, 425s, 342s, and no 45s. South Central has the lion's share of the permits out there. 17 total, with 11 of those being the anaerobic, the AD systems or AD permits. There's 117, 325s, and 2 45s in South Central. The Northeast has a total of 4, 117, and 345s. And then the Southeast has a total of 5 with 417 permits and 142. These are the recent permit modifications and key provisions of the 17. And the first set of revisions relate to the Hermetiacomposting operation. And as I said before, the black soldier fly, the scientific name Hermetia elutions, they're used just like worms to process the food scraps. And the manure generated, which they call frass, F-R-A-S-S, is similar to worm castings, and the larvae can be fed separately. They can be fed to animals and used for fish feed or fish bait. Very high source of protein, and so it's actually good for animal feed. The RMC did help with this modification. We had several pre-application meetings with DEP and regional staff. That'd be the North Central region. We helped the proposed operator with business and operation plans, and we conducted research and drafted some proposed language for the amended permit. Something very new for the department. And then the permit was actually issued in 2020 in June. And so far that operation is going well, growing very well. These are specific provisions of the Hermetiacomposting and Vermicomposting operation for General Permit 17. The operation has to be, the actual composting or vermicomposting or Hermetiacomposting has to be done in an enclosed structure or vessel. There has to be sufficient insulation, heating, cooling, ventilation, and irrigation to provide the necessary conditions to keep the worms or the fly larvae alive. And loading rates have to be based on or limited to what the capacity of the worms or black soldier fly larvae can handle. So it cannot produce excess odors, leachate, wastewater, or unprocessed materials. And seasonal variations have to be considered. Wintertime, the activity of these animals slow down, so they're not able to process as much in a warmer climate. To address that potential issue, these operations require a pad to be constructed to handle any food scraps or manure that can't be introduced into the soldier fly or worm composting areas. So again, that pad can be used to incorporate an optional pre-composting step, or it can be provided as a contingency in case there's a crash in population of the worms or the fly larvae. Obviously they won't be able to process if the population is not there to handle the material. And then a 30-day curing period is required or is not required for the pre-composting step. The second modification was for provisions to allow for non-farm operations to operate under this permit. So we called that a small scale / urban community composting operation. And so the first entity to propose this was Fairmount Park of Philadelphia. And they have, I believe, over 150 recreation centers. They have concessions in the park. And they also want to incorporate the surrounding neighborhoods as possible sources of food waste. So if it wouldn't have been for the desire to take in material from surrounding neighborhoods, they probably could have operated under a captive facility because the concessions and the rec sites are all on park property. So it could have been a captive operation. The first site that was selected for the operation, their first site, was at 5650 Rising Sun Avenue. It's in, I believe, the north central part of the city. And the site was a former streets department or park maintenance facility, I'm sorry, was decommissioned, and it was vacant, and they decided to use it for composting. And so in 2019, along with a consultant selected by the city, city agency staff, the Recycling Market Center, providing some technical assistance. We arrange for pre-application meetings with DP and central office staff, and we help draft some proposed language for an amended 17 permit. The permit was issued on October 13th of 2022, and the key modification is the incorporating the small scale composting facilities, less than 2 acres in size. So these are some of the operating conditions for all permittees of the General Permit 17. All facility types have to be operated in a manner which results in active biological decomposition or consumption of the organic materials received. For the on-farm composting, I think I said this before, it cannot exceed 5 acres for the permit area or 2 acres for the non-farm small-scale composting. You can't store more than 500 tons or 1,000 cubic yards. Or that's actually should say you cannot bring in or compost more than 500 tons or 1,000 cubic yards per year of source separated food scraps. I apologize for that typo. It does not store more than 3,000 cubic yards per acre of total materials at any one time. That includes the material that's composting, actively composting, cured areas, and finished compost. And then any incoming food waste must be incorporated within 24 hours of receipt, unless otherwise approved by the department. The sites require use of windrows, aerated static piles, or in-vessel methods for composting. The time and temperature requirements apply for food waste, 55 degrees Celsius or 131 degrees Fahrenheit or greater for at least 15 days for windrow method, and at least you maintaining those temperatures for 72 hours using the static aerated pile or in-vessel methods. And again, compost shall be cured for a minimum of 30 days. Any putrescible waste other than manure must be stored in closed, leak-proof containers. They may not be held in closed containers for more than 24 hours prior to being incorporated. Any manure must be stored in accordance with the DEP's Manure Management Manual, and composting areas shall be constructed in well-drained areas, workable surfaces, and slopes of 2 to 4% to prevent ponding and control surface water. Compost pads can be made of a mix of by the receiving facility shall be segregated and disposed of properly. Again, the operational plan has to include, where the access road tipping areas, all your stormwater controls, any water source has to require a operational narrative that includes the hours of operation for receiving waste and the volumes of waste to be processed. And then a detailed description of the processing system, such as aerated static pile. And it's a general statement at the bottom there: operator shall not cause or allow conditions that are harmful to the environment or create any safety hazards, odors, noise, dust, etc. These are exclusionary criteria. All compost sites have to be out of the 100-year floodplain. They cannot be within or in 300 feet of an exceptional value wetland, in or within 100 feet of a wetland other than an exceptional value wetland, 100 feet from a sinkhole, 300 feet from an occupied dwelling, unless a waiver has been granted, within 50 feet of a property line, within 100 feet of a stream, 300 feet of a water source, unless a waiver has been provided. And it has to stay above the perch, seasonal, or regional groundwater table. Waivers can be approved for certain exclusionary criteria. And if the finished material is sold, it must comply with the Pennsylvania Fertilizer Act and the Soil and Plant Amendment Act, administered by the Department of Agriculture. And any waste that is generated shall be managed in accordance with the Solid Waste Management Act. And I think that's a repeat bullet there. There has to be a spill prevention plan, also known as Preparedness, Prevention, and Contingency, or PPC plan. That's consistent with the most recent guidelines that DEP has published. And that plan typically includes, contacts for local fire, police, and other emergency response agencies. It has to comply with the fugitive emissions regulations. Those are the air quality regs under Chapter 123. And you have to actually comply with local laws, zoning, land development regulations, etc. This condition allows DEP to enter onto the site to inspect and search. That's again a standard permit provision, I think, in all DEP permits. And any contractors utilized for the operation reviewed by DEP, a compliance history review, any prior DEP performance, any activities are looked at by DEP under this provision. The Rising Sun site is actually operated by a private contractor, so this did apply in this application. And those are, the last bullet is standard language in a permit. Best management practices shall be implemented to divert stormwater. They have to be in compliance with this Clean Streams law. General liability insurance policy is required, and they have to show that the equipment utilized is maintained in good and operating condition. Inspections of storage areas are required, any operation areas, so forth. Specific to the on-farm operation, a farm soil conservation plan and a nutrient management plan, if it's required. If you have animals, if obviously they generate manure, so typically that material is applied on farmland, and so that has to be done in accordance with the nutrient management plan. Or if materials are brought in from on site, and then the copy of the conservation plan has to be kept on site at all times. And these are specific conditions to the Hermetiacomposting and Vermicomposting operations. DEP would like to know that the detailed description of the sources, quality, and quantity of waste that are coming in and received for processing. And of course, a detailed description of the methods and equipment utilized. Anticipated tonnage and volume for each stage of the facility. That's done through a schematic. Anticipated processing duration, dimensions of any windrows if used, and how unauthorized access is going to be controlled. Gates, fences, barriers, other methods to keep out unwanted personnel. And record keeping, that's standard. You have to keep records and maintain on site for 5 years. And any detailed records has to be made available upon DEP request. Yeah, any changes in company status, officials, address, anything that's changed with the operating, the operators have to be notified. DEP has to be notified for that, and the report has to be submitted. Again, spill reporting has to be covered under the PPC plan, and permit renewal has to start. The process to renew has to start at least 180 days prior to expiration of the general permit expiration date. And now we're going to turn it over to DEP to talk about the application fees and forms.
Sure. So specifically for the WMGM 017, that general permit, it already exists, so any of the new general permit fees wouldn't apply. Anybody looking to operate under that general permit would need to obtain a determination of applicability. The fee for that is $500. There are a number of forms associated with it. The application itself would be submitted through the department's electronic submittal system, which we refer to as OnBase. Many of you are probably familiar with that. In general, we highly recommend a pre-application meeting with the appropriate department regional office prior to submittal of a permit application. At that point, we'd provide forms, let you know if there's anything else. In this case, you'd have to submit proof of notification of the host county and municipality in addition to the required forms. They'd be able to point you in the right direction or provide you with a link to the on-base submittal system. Any questions you have, they would be able to answer at the pre-application meeting. In terms of other general permits, composting or otherwise, a new general permit, as you can see, is $1,000. That's typically if it's only municipal waste. If it's residual waste or a mixture of municipal and residual waste, there's a new general permit in that instance is $2,000. And then some of our general permits, typically the less complicated ones, those that require less of a technical review by the department, just for whatever reason, whether that's familiarity with the process or less complicated type processing or beneficial use activity. Some of those general permits are registrations, which is why that's kind of a less expensive than a determination of applicability, which is usually for some of the more complicated or those permit applications that require a little bit more review effort by the department.
All right, thank you, Jason, for providing that information.
These are just some of the forms that are on the DEP website. I don't believe all these are required, but this is an example. I know Form 20 is required. That's your checklist. There's a general information form. There's a professional certification form. Your application has to be sealed by either a professional engineer, a professional soil scientist, or a professional geologist. Environmental assessment form, contractual consent of landowner. If you're not the owner of the property, you have to get the owner, fill out this form, provide consent to operate on it. Your form MRWC, which identifies interest in identification of the permittee and any related parties, such as subcontractors. They want to know the compliance histories of all these folks. Waste analysis and classification, I'm not sure if that's required. The same with radiation protection, source reduction strategy, and General Permit 27, that's the acceptance form. I think that is required. Additional forms, your Form L, that's your contingency plan, that gets submitted with your PPC plan, map requirements, operation plan.
So we're going to wrap up here and show a couple pictures of the Hermetiacomposting operation and then the Rising Sun operation in Philadelphia. So the Hermetiacomposting operation is located at Full Circle Bioconversion LLC in Lycoming County, just northwest of Williamsport. I believe it's Old Lycoming Township, and it's on a small farm. And the actual operation occurs where that you see the E on the door of the barn and on the ground floor. The photo on the right is the fly hutch that propagates the adult flies, and then they of course lay the eggs, and then the eggs are hatched into the larva, and the larva are used to process the food waste. On the left, there's a small greenhouse that's used to house the fly hutch in the warmer months. So there's more area for the flies to move around and be in a more natural environment. And these pictures show the life cycle of the black soldier fly. On the left is the small larva that's just hatched, and then through consuming large quantities of food, that larva turns into a larger organism there. In the middle, you can see the the largest version of the larva. They do molt several times through. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but it does go through different stages, and then eventually hatches back into a fly, an adult fly. And you can see the reason why they're called soldier flies. They actually look like soldiers. And what's interesting about soldier flies is they do not have, a typical mouth or any kind of biting ability. So the transmission of vectors is very low because of that. They don't bite, they don't eat. So they basically they hatch and they mate and they die, and then they make more larvae. So a very short lifespan in the adult stage of the black soldier fly. On your left, shows a picture of a pile of frass, or the manure that the larvae generate after consuming food. It is a similar material, very similar to vermicomposting, or vermicompost, I'm sorry. And it's a very, very nutrient-rich material, just like vermicompost. It can be mixed into a soil or a compost and kind of boost the nutritional value of the compost. As I said before, the larvae themselves can be used as animal feed. Chickens go crazy over this soldier fly larva. Very high source of protein, and they're also used in fish bait and fish farming. This is a picture of the compost pad for Full Circle. It's basically an aerated system made from homemade material, homemade gathered materials. Very resourceful these people are in building this stuff. The fly hutch is homemade. The aerated system is just a system of pipes obtained locally, and also the blower unit. And there it is, full to compost. This is the one of the maps created for the Rising Sun site in Philadelphia, Fairmount Park. It's as you can see, it's in the Tacony Creek Park. At the bottom right or bottom left is the Tacony Creek, and Rising Sun Avenue is on I guess that'd be the east side of the site. It's a very small site, 0.7 acres. There's I think it's a 25,000 square foot warehouse. So all the composting occurs around the perimeter of the site. The area shown in red, the red line, is basically a fenced area. So the security was already established for the site. They just had to add a gate. And you can see this map also serves as a sort of the operational plan by numbering the particular stages of the composting process and the activities involved with those steps. That pretty much shows the operational plan. So, one is the wood chip storage. They bring that in from offsite to be used in the composting process to serve as like a bulking agent, and the bedding that's placed on top of the aeration pipes. Number two is the tipping area. And you'll see some pictures of this later. Three are the bins or the bays for the active composting where the aeration occurs. 3 and 4 are both aerated sites, aerated static pile sites. And then 5 is the cure pile. And then 6 is this area where it's screened. And then 7 is the finished compost. So basically goes on a clockwise direction around the building. This, I think I mentioned before, the city has a GIS department, so they were very helpful in assisting the project with providing mapping, particularly the exclusionary criteria map. With GIS, you can create what's called buffers to show distances from certain things. And in this case, we showed buffers of 50 feet, 100 feet, and 300 feet from the permit area, which is, again, the red permit boundary shows where the fenced area is. And so you can see the 50-foot, we basically encroach into another property. So that showed that there had to be a waiver obtained from that neighboring property owner. And they cooperated because that particular business leases land off of the park for the parking. You can see the area that's shaded. That's actually Fairmont Park. So they basically traded use of the properties. The 100-foot buffer shows they're very close proximity to the stream bed, that we actually had to go out and physically measure the setback from the fence to the creek, and it was 101 feet, fortunately, to just meet that criteria of 100-foot setback. The 300-foot shows an encroachment onto occupied structures, and in this case, in the eastern part, across from Rising Sun, are 2 Philadelphia Housing Authority apartment buildings. And so the Housing Authority had to, well, not had to, but graciously provided waivers of that required setback. This map shows the stormwater management plan. And again, fortunately, this is a pre-existing site. So all the stormwater already most of it was diverted from upstream sources, diverted around the Rising Sun site. You can see the arrows, and that depicts direction of stormwater flow when it rains. So basically nothing except from what's above falls on the site during a storm event. And it shows locations of storm inlet structures on the street. It shows contours. It shows where the BMP structures are. BMP stands for Best Management Practice. This plan had to be in compliance with the city's MS4 permit. So an MS4 program is basically a national program that requires large municipalities to develop their own stormwater systems and basically operate under one permit. So in this case, any kind of activity that generates stormwater quantities and has potential to impact the quality of stormwater, they have to follow the city's permit and what's called the best management practices or best housekeeping practices on the site. So in this case, the operation chose to tarp the active composting areas to reduce the contact water with the composted materials. So that is an accepted best management practice or housekeeping practice. At the low end of the site, you can see the green dotted lines. That depicts silt sock, which basically is a fabric sock filled with compost and mulch. And that acts as a filter. If any stormwater runs off site, it first goes through this structure and it is treated and filtered. And on the other side of it, the downslope side, the water is relatively clean. So again, that's an approved good housekeeping practice or best management practice. And here's some pictures of the compost site on Rising Sun. This is the tipping area showing the incoming food waste. It's on existing pavement. And just beyond the block walls there is the fence, perimeter fence. And between the block wall and the fence is the silt sock. I don't believe I have a picture of that. And here's the mixing pile. And then it's introduced into these bays where they're composted for several weeks. And you can see the aerator system. You have a manifold coming off of a blower unit and then piped into the bays. So those are the other bays. This is a picture of the finished compost. I failed to mention that Bennett Composting is the private entity that operates the site. The city actually went out for bid on the operation of the site through an RFP process, and Bennett Composting was the winning bidder. They also collect food scraps in Philadelphia. They have commercial and residential routes where they'll pick up by curbside the food waste. And also, as part of their service, they offer to sell back or give back the bags of compost. This is inside the warehouse. They have a vermicompost bin there. It's a commercial scale where they can make vermicompost there. And then on the right is a small screener to screen the compost. And I believe that's it.
Jason and Chris, do you want to add anything to that?
I don't have anything to add. I think you did a good job covering it. Thank you.
Okay.
There was one question here that I think at the end here that wasn't answered or possibly wasn't answered. It's more for Jason and I. It's asking whether there's a community option for the fees, I'm assuming. And just to answer that real quickly, there is not. Basically, the fee structure that's in place now is the only fee structure the DEP has. Sometimes those things can be expensive, but that's basically what we have as a way to get the permit fees in place and to process the permit.
Okay. So we're gonna open it up to questions. I think Tim Bennett is on the call. If he wants to provide anything, I think I allowed you to unmute yourself and talk. So feel free to chime in, Tim. So let me go through the questions. The Parks and Rec department of the city of Philadelphia runs this site. Well, they owns the site, but they have Bennett Composting operate it. So I believe their goal is to make more of these throughout the city under this permit. Do we have any questions?
Wayne, there's a few questions here that people have. Just how long does a permit last? Jason, if you want to, get into detail about that. And then you shared, basically, they're asking if this can be shared. You were just basically detailing that, but I'm guessing we'll have to get the emails from people to share it.
Yeah, and again, our role in this, we're a recycling market center, so our mission is to develop markets for recycled materials, and that includes organics. So this is a perfect example of what we can do. We can assist someone who's considering applying for a permit and starting up an operation. We can help you get started in that venture. Get you, in a pre-application meeting with DEP. We can get you in touch with consultants. There are several consultants on the call right now. If they want to give me a note there, I'll put that on the list of consultants that do that kind of work. We can help, sourcing feedstock, help you evaluate equipment. So we are available for any assistance that you might need.
Mm-hmm. And as far as how long a permit lasts, we issued permits for terms of 10 years. Specific to the WMGM 017 permit, that was renewed last summer, I believe. And so if someone were to obtain coverage under that permit at like today, their coverage would last until the 10 years from whenever that permit was last renewed. So you'd end up getting a little over 9 years of permit coverage, probably, if you were issued coverage around this point. And then subsequently, anytime that permit is renewed, you would have to renew your permit coverage, and then you would be lined up with like the expiration date of that permit. So you would get the full 10 years in any subsequent renewal.
Yeah, a good example was Full Circle bioconversion. They got their permit in 2020, and they had to turn around in 2022 and reapply. So I think administratively it's not too difficult, but it's just the way the permit system works that you have to reapply, even though you got it, a year ago. So there's a question here: does RMC charge for its services? Not for this particular line of work. We're not allowed to assist in any permit preparation or preparing your permit. So we're kind of like the concierge. We kind of get you started. point you in the right direction, get you into your pre-application meeting with DEP, and then if you happen to do the permit yourself, we can kind of look over your shoulder and review things, but we can actually do the permit. That has to be done by a consultant if you can't do it. Any other questions? The permits are available online. If you go to the DEP website, they're all these general permits that I mentioned are listed on their website, and you can download them. All the forms can be downloaded. And again, if you need some help, just give us a call. So again, thank you, Chris and Jason, and thank you for attending, and to talk to you soon. So have a great day, everybody.